My name is Terry Rickett, and I'm 28 years old. The lie started small, the size of a sigh no one noticed. It began as a label people said gently, like they were placing a blanket over me to keep me warm. Except blankets can also smother. Sophomore year, my life ran on rails other people had laid down. Pre-med track at state, meal plan I barely used, a roommate who collected succulents and heartbreak. Mom, Linda, kept a stack of my acceptance letters in the hallway console like proof of purchase. Dad, Daniel, was the quiet orbit that made our family move. Then came Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that ends one life and starts another. Dad's company downsized. 2 months severance, a handshake that felt like a shove. The air at home changed density. Even the refrigerator hummed differently. "We need to talk about school," Dad said that night, hands folded like he was praying to the table. Mom hovered behind him, fingers on his shoulder, the way people grip handrails when the bus is about to lurch. "I can get a job," I rushed in. "Part-time, cover some." Dad's look asked me not to be a hero. "It's more than that. We can't afford out of state anymore. In-state would be hard. Maybe a semester off." The words didn't land so much as ricochet. A semester becomes a year, becomes a story about who you are now. I could feel the timeline narrowing like a hallway. "What if I transfer?" I heard myself say. "Community college near home. I can work nights, keep taking credits. Cheaper, temporary." Relief passed over their faces, a weather front. Because I had said it first, it didn't have to be their failure. That weekend, I boxed a girlhood's worth of assumptions and carried them down 3 dorm flights that smelled like old pizza and new perfume. I enrolled at Riverside Community, signed HR papers for a warehouse 11 p.m., 7 a.m. shift, and learned the ritual of neon vests, steel-toed boots, and conveyor belts that never sleep. Days became a puzzle I solved with naps and coffee. Evenings, I slid into a desk with hands still buzzing from the forklift. I didn't tell my parents about the night shift, not because it was a secret, because some things are easier to carry if you don't have to carry someone else's reaction too. Thanksgiving arrived like a deadline. I got off at 7, drove home with warehouse dust in my hair and a calculus quiz in my bag. When I walked in, Aunt Carol was at the kitchen table, all perfume and opinions. "Terry, honey," she sang, hugging me. "Your mother told me you're taking a break from school. That must have been a hard choice." I looked at Mom. She was very focused on stirring coffee. "I'm not taking a break," I said. "I transferred. Community college. Evening classes." Aunt Carol blinked. "Oh, Linda said you decided college wasn't for you right now." Mom finally looked up. "Community college isn't the same as, real college, sweetheart. It's more like vocational." "It's still college, Mom." I kept my voice level. "I'm working toward my degree." "If you say so," she murmured, that gentle tone people use to tuck knives into. I should have fought harder, but exhaustion made cowardice sound like diplomacy. I let it go, let the gravy blot out the topic, let the kitchen timer save us all. The pattern arrived on a conveyor belt. Neighborhood run-ins, relatives who smelled like hairspray and regret, women from Mom's book club asking, "So, you're working now?" Sometimes the traditional path just isn't for everyone. Their smiles held sympathy the way Tupperware holds leftovers, airtight, faintly condescending. I corrected them at first. "I'm still in school, evening program, I work nights." Confusion bloomed. "But your mother said," "Of course she did." After Christmas, I asked Mom why the world thought I'd quit the one thing she'd built her identity around. "I never said dropped out," she answered, wiping a spotless counter. "People make assumptions. I can't explain your entire situation to everyone. It's complicated." "A different path sounds like a euphemism for failure," I said. "That's not what I meant." It was exactly what she meant. Not malicious. Just convenient. Mom had auditioned me for a role. Daughter, pre-med, poster child. Community college and steel-toed boots didn't fit the wardrobe. I tried Dad. "Does it bother you I'm not at state?" He shook his head. "I'm proud you adapted. Not everyone could handle this." "Can you tell Mom that? She keeps telling people I swallowed the word. Dropped. Out. He exhaled. "Your mother loves the way a story looks on paper. When reality edits it, she struggles." "So I let her lie?" "It's not lying exactly," he said carefully. "Selective truth." "That's a synonym." When you're too tired to carry both your load and someone else's denial, you start choosing silence. I learned to swallow corrections the way I swallowed cheap coffee at 2 a.m. Fast, no tasting. I finished my associates in 2 years, on no sleep and stubbornness. Transferred to state's evening program for working adults. I made flashcards on break room boxes and memorized enzymes while the floor manager lectured a guy for leaning. No dorm life, no game days, no library group photos. Just work, class, sleep, repeat. There is a holiness to repetition when it's attached to a purpose no one else believes in. Graduation crept up like sunrise you've earned. Same 4-year timeline as if I'd stayed at state, but in Mom's voice it became eventually. She clapped at my ceremony, took a photo where her smile didn't reach her eyes, and told Diane from church, "Terry's getting serious about life now." As if the past years were unserious, a hobby I'd outgrown. I should tell you about Evan. He came later, but even here, in the beginning, his presence is a ghost light. The first time he heard the dropout rumor, he squinted like a scientist at a mislabeled slide. If that story were true, he said, it would have evidence. Evan is the kind of man who believes in evidence. But back then, the proof lived only in my bones, and the clock-ins stamped on a lanyard no one framed. The months after graduation were ordinary in the ways that make a life. I got an entry-level research assistant job at a pharmaceutical company. Health insurance felt like luxury. I moved into an apartment where the walls remembered no one's arguments. My body relearned sunlight. Mom's narrative evolved the way software updates without fixing the bug. "Terry's doing well now," she told people. The now doing the violence. Took her a while to find her path. I stopped correcting. What was the point of wrestling a story that had more subscribers than the truth? Sometimes survival looks like choosing your battles. Sometimes it looks like choosing yourself. But small lies collect interest. They accrue in group chats and living rooms until they're the only currency anyone wants to trade. I didn't know it yet, but the debt would come due, loudly, publicly, with glossy paper and a headline that used my name. One Thursday evening, I swung by my parents' place to drop off Dad's forgotten blood pressure meds. The house pulsed with voices. Book club night. Laughter. The clink of glasses. The smell of baked brie. Mom's friends had the kind of smiles that judged while they congratulated. "Oh, Terry," Janet trilled. "You're the one who took a break from college, right? How's that going?" I looked at Mom. She didn't meet my eyes. "I didn't take a break," I said, voice steady. "I finished my bachelor's 3 years ago. I'm a research scientist at Morrison Pharmaceuticals." Silence, the kind that leaves rings on the furniture. Mom laughed too brightly. "I never said she dropped out exactly. People misunderstood." For 6 years, I'd let the small lie grow teeth, because I was too tired to keep my hand in its mouth. Standing in my mother's living room, watching women who'd traded their curiosity for gossip tilt their heads at me, I understood. Fatigue had become complicity. I left before the brie came out of the oven. Driving home, I gripped the wheel and pictured a different kind of room. Brightly lit, print glossy, my own face on a cover I hadn't imagined. The image was ridiculous then, a scrap of daydream tossed to the back seat. But sometimes the future throws you a breadcrumb retroactively, just to prove it was paying attention. The lie was no longer small, and it had my mother's voice. I was going to teach it mine. I used to think the hardest part of working nights was the fatigue, the kind that rattles your bones like loose change. But no. The hardest part was how silence replaced me in conversations I wasn't there to correct. I'd walk into family gatherings half asleep, half proud, carrying exam flashcards in my coat pocket, and watch relatives tilt their heads. "So Terry, how's the break from school treating you?" Or, "It's good you're working. College isn't for everyone." Every time I corrected them. "I didn't quit. I'm still in classes. I transferred. I'll finish." And every time, confusion clouded their faces like I'd contradicted something carved into stone. It wasn't stone, it was Mom. Linda Rickett had been telling everyone since high school that her daughter was on the fast track to becoming a doctor. She'd brandished my pre-med acceptance letter at book club like a lottery ticket. When I transferred to community college, the story no longer sparkled. So she adjusted it, quietly, casually, as if reality were just a piece of fabric she could hem. By the time I earned my associate's degree, the college dropout rumor had more traction than the truth. At church potlucks, in grocery aisles, at neighbor barbecues, people approached me with that careful, sympathetic tone. I started letting it slide. Correcting lies is exhausting when the lie comes from your own mother. Meanwhile, my days blurred into the same relentless sequence: work, class, study, sleep. I finished labs in fluorescent classrooms with janitors vacuuming around us, then clocked in for warehouse shifts that smelled like metal and sweat. On break, I memorized chemical structures by the glow of a vending machine. And somehow, it worked. After 2 years, I transferred back to state, this time to the evening program for working adults. I didn't wear college sweatshirts. I didn't tailgate or go to football games. I wore steel-toed boots and carried textbooks that smelled faintly of diesel. By 22, I had my bachelor's. On paper, my timeline matched any traditional student. But in my mother's mouth, it was finally, as if I dragged my feet while everyone else sprinted. Dad noticed. He always noticed. "Terry, what you're doing takes guts," he said one night, rinsing dishes while Mom busied herself with her phone. "You adapted. That's worth more than pride points." I nodded, but it wasn't his silence that stung. It was hers. After graduation, I landed a job as a research assistant at a pharmaceutical company. Entry level, but with health insurance and possibilities. I rented a small apartment with squeaky floors and light that actually touched my face in the mornings. My body adjusted to sunlight again. And then came Evan Park. He wasn't a scientist. He worked in IT at a firm across town. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party. He was the one refilling everyone's glasses, the one who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. We swapped numbers when he noticed my notes on cellular metabolism scribbled in the margins of a paperback I was carrying. A few weeks later, sitting across from me at a cafe, he asked gently, "Why do people keep saying you dropped out when you're literally studying pathways more complicated than subway maps?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Because my mom likes a certain story. I didn't fit it." He frowned. "But narratives solidify when respectable people repeat them. The longer you stay quiet, the more real they get." He was right. I knew he was right. But exhaustion had taught me to fold instead of fight. Still, with Evan, I felt the first tug of rebellion. The first whisper that maybe silence wasn't the safest choice. It was complicity. The irony was that life outside my family was blossoming. At work, I was thriving. Supervisors noticed my focus, my grit. My lab team started calling me the night shift scholar. I even began thinking about graduate school. But at every family event, I was still the dropout, the one who lost her way. One Sunday dinner, my cousin whispered, "I heard you're back on track now. That's good. Aunt Linda said you weren't sure about school for a while." I felt my face heat, back on track, as if I'd been derailed, as if 6 years of sweat and study didn't count because they didn't look like ivy-covered walls and dorm mixers. I smiled tight and excused myself. In the bathroom, I gripped the sink until my knuckles whitened. My reflection looked like someone living two parallel lives, the scientist building a future and the dropout everyone else seemed to see. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my apartment, Evan's words circling my mind. Narratives calcify when they're repeated by people in rooms you can't enter. He was right, and Mom was writing my life in ink while I was too tired to pick up the pen. What I didn't know then was that proof, hard, glossy, undeniable proof, was already on its way. And it was going to rip the false story wide open. By the time I was 24, my body was conditioned to running on fumes. If there were an Olympic medal for balancing exhaustion with ambition, I would have won gold twice. I had my bachelor's degree in hand, a job as a research assistant that paid enough for rent and groceries, and the faintest feeling that maybe, finally, I was building something. But I wanted more. Not because I had to prove anything, at least not to strangers. It was because I could feel the ceiling above me pressing down. Research teams had leaders. Leaders had advanced degrees. If I wanted a seat at the table, I'd need one too. So I enrolled in a master's program in biochemistry. Evening classes, again, because I was still working full-time. I didn't tell my parents. I couldn't stand another round of Mom's minimizing, her way of turning milestones into footnotes. I'd learned the pattern. Whatever I achieved, she'd find a way to soften it, as if protecting herself from being impressed. So instead, I built my secret. Night classes, lab reports finished at dawn, work presentations fueled by vending machine snacks. I lived double lives, employee by day, grad student by night. And for once, the secrecy felt liberating. 2 years later, at 26, I graduated with my master's. At the same time, my company promoted me to senior research scientist. That night, Evan and I celebrated with takeout on my apartment floor, champagne in mismatched mugs. "So," he said, leaning back against the couch, "when are you going to tell your parents you're no longer the dropout?" I laughed, but it caught in my throat. "They'll just reframe it. Mom will say, 'Terry finally got serious about life.' She'll make it sound like I wandered until now." Evan's eyes softened. "Maybe. But if you keep hiding your success, she's not just rewriting your past, she's erasing your present." His words stayed lodged under my skin like a splinter. The next Sunday dinner, I decided to say something. We were halfway through roasted chicken when I blurted, "I finished my master's last week, and I got promoted, senior research scientist." Dad's fork paused midair. "Master's? When did you start that?" "2 years ago, evening program." His face lit up, pride, unfiltered and real. "Terry, that's incredible." Mom's expression, though, was a storm. Happy, confused, maybe annoyed. "You've been in graduate school for 2 years and didn't tell us?" "You never asked what I was doing in the evenings," I said. Her lips tightened. "Well, congratulations. I just wish you'd shared it. We could have celebrated." I looked at her carefully. "Would you have?" She didn't answer. She stabbed her chicken instead. Later in the car, Evan shook his head. "She can't just say she's proud. She has to twist it so you're the one withholding." I stared out the window. That's the story she prefers. I gave up, then slowly figured things out. It makes her the patient, supportive mother instead of the one who erased me. A week later, my theory was proven. Mom's book club met at our house again. I stopped by to drop off Dad's prescription. Voices floated through the living room, punctuated by the clink of wine glasses. Janet, the queen of subtle digs, looked up. "Oh, Terry, you're the one who took a break from college, right? How's that going?" The room turned toward me. I kept my tone even. "I didn't take a break. I finished my bachelor's years ago. I earned my master's last week. I'm a senior research scientist at Morrison Pharmaceuticals." Silence. The kind that exposes everyone. Mom gave a laugh that didn't sound like hers. "Well, I never said she dropped out exactly. People must have misunderstood." Janet looked between us, skeptical. I set Dad's medication on the table and left without another word. Driving home, fury roared in my chest. How long had she been telling that version? How many rooms had she filled with the idea that I'd failed? At a stoplight, Evan's words came back. "Narratives calcify when they're repeated in rooms you can't enter." I realized then that for 6 years, my mother had been chiseling my life into stone, an image I didn't recognize, but everyone else believed. And now, the truth was trapped behind it. The next morning, I stared at my diplomas on the wall, paper proof that I hadn't failed. But in my mother's voice, I still sounded like a dropout. Something inside me snapped. I decided, if she wouldn't tell the truth, I'd find a way to shout it so loudly the lie couldn't breathe. What I didn't know then was that my chance was already coming. Not from me, but from the university I'd left all those years ago. When the email came, I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. Subject line, Alumni Spotlight Inquiry. I stared at the sender, State University Alumni Magazine. My heart kicked. I'd left state after sophomore year. Wouldn't I count as unfinished business? But the editor wrote warmly, "We're doing a feature on alumni who took non-traditional paths to success. Your research caught our attention. Several of your publications have been cited in major studies. We'd love to interview you." For a second, I thought of ignoring it. The irony, state, the place that lived in Mom's narrative as proof of my failure, now wanted to celebrate me. I called Evan, the only person who knew every jagged edge of this story. "They want me for a cover feature." He laughed. "Terry, that's not just irony, that's poetic justice." "I don't know if my family will see it that way." "Does it matter?" His voice sharpened with affection. "You've been erased long enough. Let the world know who you really are." So I said yes. The interview was brutal in the best way. They asked about the warehouse job, the exhaustion, the community college nights. They wanted the messy details. I gave them everything. The photographer captured me in the lab, surrounded by the equipment that had become my second home. Another session in my apartment, sunlight spilling across a stack of research papers. 2 weeks later, the editor called. "Terry, we're putting you on the cover." I sank onto my couch, dizzy. My face, my name, on glossy paper that would land in thousands of mailboxes, including my mother's. When the magazine arrived, I slid it out of the envelope with trembling hands. My photo stared back in a lab coat, headline screaming, "From Night Shift to Breakthrough, How Terry Rickett Built a Research Career on Her Own Terms." Inside, 4 pages laid out my journey, quotes about resilience, details of my published studies, praise from my department head. Reading it felt like watching my own ghost be resurrected. Evan flipped through beside me. This is bulletproof. No one can twist it, even your mom. I gave a dry laugh. You underestimate her creativity. We didn't have to wait long. 2 Thursdays later, Mom's book club gathered at her house. Dad called me afterward. His voice carried both apology and awe. So, Janet brought the magazine. Of course she did. Janet collected gossip like seashells. She showed everyone, said, "Isn't it amazing that Linda's daughter, who dropped out, ended up this successful?" I pressed my hand to my forehead. And what did Mom say? Dad hesitated. At first, nothing. Then, when they kept asking why she never mentioned you're a lead researcher, she said... His voice faltered. What, Dad? She said she didn't like to brag. I laughed, but it cracked into something bitter. 6 years of minimizing, and now she wanted credit for false humility. Dad sighed. Terry, I think it's time. Dinner. You, me, and your mother. No more avoiding this. The idea of sitting across from her, hearing excuses sharpened into soft lies, made my stomach twist. But maybe he was right. Maybe it was past time. That night, Evan found me pacing our kitchen. I can't, I said. If I sit there, I'll either scream or collapse. He caught my wrist gently. Then do neither. Sit there and tell the truth. Don't let her wriggle out of it. You've carried the weight of her story long enough. I stared at the magazine still open on the table. My face looked back at me, proud, defiant, the kind of woman who belonged to herself. Okay, I whispered, I'll do it. But inside, fear and anger churned like storm water. For 6 years, my mother's version of me had lived in every room I wasn't in. Now finally, I would walk into one of those rooms myself. And this time, I wasn't going to let her speak for me. I drove to my parents' house on a Sunday, the alumni magazine still tucked in my bag like a weapon. Mom was in the kitchen when I walked in, chopping vegetables with an aggression that made each carrot snap like a bone. Dad greeted me with a weary smile, newspaper folded too neatly on the coffee table. We sat down at the dining room table, plates steaming between us. Silence filled the room, thick as gravy left too long on the stove. Dad cleared his throat. Linda, do you want to start, or should I? Mom set her fork down with a clink. I saw your magazine article, she said flatly. I figured you could have told me about it. I almost laughed. I could have told you about a lot of things, Mom. My master's degree, my promotions, my published research, my speaking engagements. But I stopped telling you because every time I did, you made them feel smaller than they were. Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've been telling people I dropped out of college for 6 years. You let them believe I failed while I was working harder than ever to succeed. I never said dropped out, she snapped, defensive now. You let them think it, I shot back, which is the same thing. You hid my achievements because they didn't fit the story you wanted to tell. Dad leaned in. Linda, she's right. You've been embarrassed about our finances and projected that shame onto Terry's story. Her face faltered for a moment, like a crack in a mask. I was proud of you, she whispered. I didn't know how to explain it. That you were working nights, at a warehouse, that we couldn't afford to keep you at state. It felt complicated. It wasn't complicated, I said, my voice shaking. It was real, and instead of being proud of me for adapting, you pretended I gave up. You erased me. She blinked hard. Tears welled, but she fought them. People would have pitied us. Pitied you. Better pity than erasure, I said quietly. At least pity acknowledges existence. The table went silent. My fork rested untouched. Finally, Dad spoke. Linda, it's time to stop hiding. Terry deserves the truth. All of it. Evan's words echoed in my head. Sit there and tell the truth. Don't let her wriggle out. So I pushed further. This isn't just about book clubs or neighbors. This is about you refusing to see me. The real me. Not the version you wanted, a daughter who stayed on your script. I built a career you can't even describe to your friends because you won't let yourself acknowledge it. Mom covered her face for a moment, then dropped her hands. Her eyes were red. You're right. I was ashamed. Not of you, of us. That we couldn't provide what I thought we should. So I told a story that was easier to live with. And in that story, I was a failure. Her shoulders slumped. I didn't realize how much it hurt you. How could you not? My voice cracked. Every time I corrected someone, you waved it off, changed the subject. I cared what you thought. I needed you to be proud. Instead, you let me live as a dropout in other people's mouths. Tears finally slid down her face. I'm sorry. Truly. I didn't know how to untangle it once it started, and the longer it went on, the harder it became. Dad reached across the table and took her hand. Then start untangling it now. She nodded slowly. I will. I'll tell people the truth. I'll correct the story, and I'll tell them I was wrong. It wasn't instant healing. It couldn't be. But in that moment, for the first time in 6 years, I believe she meant it. We finished dinner quietly, the weight of unspoken years heavy in the room. As I left, Mom caught my arm. Her eyes were raw, but her voice was steady. Terry, I am proud of you. More than I can say. I should have said it long ago. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Driving home, the magazine sat on the passenger seat, glinting under the streetlights. For once, I didn't feel like it was proof I had to wave in someone's face. It felt like a mirror, and Mom had finally looked. Change didn't happen overnight. My mother didn't wake up the next morning and become someone new, but something subtle shifted. A week later, she called me in the middle of my lunch break. I talked to Janet, she said, her voice taut with nerves. I told her I'd been wrong about you, that you didn't drop out, that you worked harder than anyone to finish your degree. I held my phone tighter. And how did she take it? She was surprised, asked why I let people think otherwise. There was a pause. I told her the truth, that I was embarrassed about our finances, and I took it out on your story. My chest tightened. For the first time, she wasn't dodging. Over the next few months, Dad told me quietly that Mom had corrected neighbors, cousins, even her hairdresser. Slowly, piece by piece, she dismantled the lie she'd built. And more surprising, she began asking questions, real ones. Tell me about that protein synthesis paper everyone cites, she said one Sunday. I explained it simply, bracing for disinterest, but she leaned in, genuinely listening, even asking follow-ups. I should have asked before, she admitted. I'm sorry I didn't. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Then came the invitation. State University asked me to give the commencement speech, to share my story with students who might face their own obstacles. Standing on that stage, looking out at rows of caps and gowns, I spoke the truth I'd carried for years. Success doesn't always look like you think it will. Sometimes it looks like working overnight shifts, studying on breaks, and wondering if you can keep going. But if you hold on to your own story, even when others rewrite it, that's what matters. In the audience, I saw Dad beaming, and Mom, tears streaking down her face, clapping the hardest. 3 months later, Evan proposed. At dinner with my parents, Mom surprised me. She pulled out her phone, snapped a photo of us, and typed a Facebook post aloud. Thrilled to announce my daughter, Terry Rickett, senior research scientist, is engaged to the wonderful Evan. So proud of the life she's built. No qualifiers, no finally, no eventually, just pride, straight and unvarnished. For once she asked, "Is this okay?" "It's perfect, Mom." The biggest surprise came weeks later, when I stopped by and found her sorting through old boxes. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Making an album," she said. "All the things I should have documented but didn't. Your degrees, your publications, your magazine cover." She smiled nervously. "I can't go back, but I can start telling it right." I sat with her, adding pages. For the first time in years, it felt like we were on the same side of the story. The album made its debut at a family dinner. Mom stood, holding it up like an offering. "For years," she said, voice trembling, "I let people believe Terry had dropped out of college, that she'd failed. I was wrong. The truth is, she worked harder than anyone I know. She earned her degrees, built a career, and became a scientist doing work that matters. And I should have shouted it from the rooftops." The room went quiet, then Aunt Carol started clapping. Others joined in. I blinked back tears. After years of silence, I was finally being celebrated, not despite my path, but because of it. At our wedding 6 months later, Mom gave a toast. I braced myself, expecting a familiar twist. "When Terry was in college," she began, "she faced obstacles that would have broken most people. Financial hardship, night shifts, exhaustion. But she didn't quit. She adapted. She excelled. She graduated with honors, earned her master's, and became a scientist whose work saves lives." Her voice cracked. For a long time, I couldn't see it. I was too attached to the story I'd written in my head, but her path, the one she carved herself, was better, stronger, real, to Terry and Evan, who remind us that success isn't about fitting a script, but writing your own. The applause roared. Evan squeezed my hand, tears in his eyes, and in that moment I knew the lie was dead. The truth had finally been told.